Mower blade sharpening is often neglected maintenance, and most people don't do it nearly as much as they should. I'm going to show you a quick way to tell if your mower blades actually do need sharpening, and I'll show you my favorite way to sharpen them. Plus, at the very end of the video, I'm going to be giving away 2 sharpeners to 2 lucky viewers. It could even be you. Whether you have a ride-on mower, push mower, or even a robot mower, they all have blades that eventually need sharpening. And if you're like me, there's no tree root too tall and no stick too big to run over, so I should probably sharpen my blades even more frequently than like a responsible homeowner. But how do you actually know when the blades are getting dull? Well, the grass will tell you. Let me rephrase. The grass will show you. Look at these grass tips from a local park that definitely is not my own yard. See how they're shredded on the ends and turning white? That means that the mower blade isn't cutting the grass as much as it's tearing the grass. The cut won't be as nice, and shredded grass tips also leave you more vulnerable to disease creeping into the lawn. The solution is to sharpen your blades, and if you've never done this before, it's actually fairly easy to do yourself. You'll need to get under the mower, and I'm using a mower jack for this. The blades are held on in the center with one bolt. I'm using an impact wrench like a NASCAR pit crew, but you can also do this by hand too. If you're doing it by hand, you might have to block the blade with a small 2x4 to prevent it from spinning as you loosen the bolt. A quick safety tip here is to disconnect the spark plugs. Technically speaking, while highly unlikely, the mower could start by turning the blades as you're trying to remove them. By pulling the boots off the plugs, that potential is eliminated, but the biggest benefit is that I won't get comments telling me that I should always do that. A couple of ugga-duggas and I've got all 3 blades off in seconds. My blades are in decently rough shape. You thought I was kidding about running over sticks, didn't you? Well, I'm not, and I've got the receipts to back up my murderous stick rampage that is my weekly mowing. The first thing I'm gonna do is get that crusted grass off the blades because that's gonna throw off the balance. Scraping by hand is an option, but if I can do things faster and more dangerously with power tools, I'm always going to go that route. This is a fiber wheel and I'm going to be using it on this 4-inch grinder. Second safety tip of the video is to wear eye protection and hearing protection. Tinnitus isn't very cool. The grass will come off fairly easily, and if you're worried about bare metal, you can always hit them with a can of Rust-Oleum. For the actual sharpening, I'm going to use the same grinder, but I'm going to switch out the fiber wheel for this 60 grit flap disc from Diablo. The flap disc might be the best tool for sharpening, and I saw a bunch of guys on Reddit recommending it a few years ago, and I must agree, it's pretty nice. I like this Diablo version because it spins on nice and easy, no tools required. The star of the show is this sharpening jig from GSTP. It holds the grinder at a specified angle and allows you to machine the blade edge with precision and accuracy. Setup is fairly easy, and I'm mounting it to my workbench. It mounts to a bracket, and I like to keep the bracket bolted in place and just add and remove the sharpener when I need it with the 2 supplied Allen bolts. The sharpening angle is adjustable, and I'm going for a nice 40-degree angle on mine, and I'm locking it in with the thumb screw on the back. The blade fits into the top and is held tight by the hand clamp. You can see from the side how the angle adjustment works. It just holds the blade at a desired angle to contact the grinder perfectly every pass. The grinder slides onto the swing arm by adding a guide pin, and the position is adjustable by turning the bolt on the end. Ideally, I want the center of the flap disc to be centered on the blade edge, so I'm going to adjust that bolt to get that setting dialed in just a little bit better. This is going to create sparks, and grinding metal typically has that effect. Make sure your area is clear of things that could get damaged by flying sparks. Or maybe you have a drain pan full of used oil from the last video you made. Might want to clean that up. I'm flipping the grinder on and starting to make passes up the blade. It's important to try to move quickly and consistently to avoid grinding too much in one spot and making the edge uneven. I'm going to make several passes until I think it's looking fairly good. Perfection is not a word in my vocabulary, and it's not like I'm going to stop running over sticks, so I get it pretty close and I call it good. If I wanted to get all the chips and divots out of the blade edge, I'd just continue to remove material until they're all gone, but 80% is plenty good for me, and it's kind of a metaphor for my life. After I'm finished with one side, I flip the blade around and do the other side, and eventually I work through all 3 blades. Now, if I were doing this more frequently, it only takes about 3 or 4 passes to get the edge back after being dull. If you're like me and neglect your tools, then it might take a bit more work to bring them back to life. Now, I'm not done yet, and one of the most important pieces is up next, and that's balancing the blades before they go back on the mower. What? Balancing the blades? Sharpening the blades removes metal from one side, and if you remove too much metal from one side, you can create an imbalance within the blade itself. Why should you care? Well, if the blade isn't balanced and spinning at a high rate of speed, it'll create a vibration and you'll definitely feel it through the deck sitting on the mower. Remember when your mower was new and everything ran smooth and nice and just felt perfect? You hadn't hit any rocks yet or hooked the deck on a tree or bottomed out on any tree roots. Balanced blades can help to bring that smoothness back, and I'm using this balancer again from GSTP. It mounts on a wall or a bench or anything perpendicular to the floor. It has a cone-shaped end used for centering the blade, and the bearing housing with magnets on it slides up from the back to hold the blade in place. The first feature of the tool is the measuring rod, and it's used to make sure your blade isn't actually bent. I can take a measurement at the tip of the blade, flip it 180 degrees, and make sure that the other side is at least close to what the first side was. Not all bent blades are obvious, so this method quickly susses out any irregularities. For the actual balancing, just hold the blade straight across and let go. The bearing housing allows the blade to turn if it's too heavy on one side. You can see here that my blade won't sit level and wants to drop on one side. Some rotation is okay, maybe 15-ish degrees, but this is a bit more than I want and shows a decent weight imbalance that I'd want to correct. So how do I do that? Simply go back to the sharpener and make a few more passes to remove slightly more material on the heavy side of the blade. Throw it back on the balancer and guess and check your way to a nicely balanced end result. You can see here that there is minimal movement now when the blade is released. Double check the other side, and this one is ready to go back on the mower. There are other ways to do this, and here's an example of a cheap blade balancer that works okay-ish. I mean, you can even just pound a nail into the wall and use that. But this balancer from GSTP is awesome, and the bearings actually make it very accurate. I bet you saw that skateboard in the last few shots, didn't you? Now you're wondering, this dude's pushing 40. There's no way he could even do a kickflip. And I'm here to tell you to never underestimate how much time a millennial spent at the skate park as a teenager growing up. Boom, nailed it. In work boots, I might add. And it only took me about 4 tries.